Welcome. I must warn you before I start speaking that my voice is kind of gone after last evening's festivities. So I'll be speaking slow and very well. I also sound much older than I am, but all right. I'm going to be talking about using PowerShell in a cloud-native world. It is a talk that's a little bit going to be a little bit more special than probably most of the other talks here. I'm gonna try to maybe get some of you to speak a little bit about what you're doing currently, if you are doing stuff in cloud native, and especially with PowerShell, because I'm very curious what other people have experience with that. But maybe introduce myself. This is me. My name is Robert. I work at Crayon. So I'm based out of Oslo in Norway, but Crayon Group is a global company that has basically offices from one side of the globe to the other. And I'm currently working as the head of platform engineering, which is a title that sounds fancy, but it's basically just, I'm just automating things, I guess. It's the way of looking at that. Microsoft MVP for Azure. Hopefully, when next month I'll continue to be that. You never know. And I've been 2 years in a row HashiCorp ambassador for the work that I do with Terraform and things like that. But more like, I guess, specific to this topic, I am a contributor to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I've do a lot of things in a lot of different groups, but the primary things that I do there is I'm one of the co-chairs for the Cooperative Delivery Working Group, which also sounds fancy. And as of very soon, probably, I'm going to be a maintainer on the Open GitOps project as well. So if you want to talk about any of those things, feel free to contact me afterwards. So what is cloud native? One of my the funnest questions I get, because people are like isn't it cloud? Is cloud native? No, well, in the same way that like VMs were a cloud when they were only on-premise. Like there's something around it that made the cloud, right? Same thing here. People use the term cloud native technology. I have done that as well. But it's actually not really about the technology itself. It's the technical components that make up cloud native. In many cases, are old, very old. Old for most people, but in like computer world, like ancient. Some of them were popularized during like the cloud movement, like when we all started getting into the cloud age. And then got some updates, and then they kind of became cloud native. Many of the tools we use started off like in the early days of system administration. For instance, like the origin of containers can be traced back to the 70s, but it's not until Docker in 2013, made it popular, that became a thing that we did. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation has a definition. And there's a couple of key things here that I would like to point out. Build and run scalable applications in modern dynamic environments. They go on to list containers, service meshes, microservice, immutable infrastructure, and declarative APIs. For me, many of these things kind of like overlap. But the main thing here for me is immutable infrastructure and declarative APIs. That's the foundation of what the cloud native system is. And like it says, like enable loose coupled systems, combined with robust automation that allow engineers to make high impact changes frequently and predictable with minimal toil. And the problem here for people that come from like a PowerShell world, most of us have a tendency of like coming from, I guess, Windows, infrastructure, and PowerShell has worked for us for a lot of things, and it's kind of what set me off in the direction that I've, the direction of my journey to actually becoming someone who actually programs software. But many of the problems that I see with PowerShell in the cloud native world is the automation part. Automation is part of the system. The systems that you are using that are cloud native also automates. So, you know, what will PowerShell for a cloud native developer or administrator look like, right? So currently, the way that I see it, we still need a shell, but there are many alternatives. You know, when PowerShell is not a new thing, but obviously people on other systems are used to other shells, and you know, it's basically just like what do you prefer and how do you want to do it things. So we don't need PowerShell for a shell in that sense, but obviously it could be our daily driver, and that works fine. And it's still useful to abstract and automate tasks, but like I said, that's part of the platforms now. Like Kubernetes, for instance, is a platform that does a lot of automation for you based on declarative APIs. So in what sense can we automate against that? Like we can basically just do CI/CD pipeline jobs and stuff like that against it. And that's kind of the extent of the automation, like to get some information out. And I'm going to look a little bit on how we can do that. And Cloud Native is built on APIs, but there are many tools that offer abstractions. Obviously, the one that I usually work with, which is Terraform, you know, works directly against the API of the cloud platform, but you don't have to deal with that. If you're doing stuff with PowerShell again, you most likely would have to write something that would contact that and probably get some sort of framework for it to be efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of tools out there that can do all those things for you. So, like, with a show of hand, how many of you consider yourselves to work in a cloud native business? Like 2, 3, including me. And you all use then PowerShell for your automation. Does that? No? Yes? No? And for those who are not in what you would consider a cloud native ecosystem, that means not using modern cloud services that, for instance, like certain platforms and services and things like Kubernetes. Is it more VMs then?
It's a mix.
It's a mix. Yeah.
Try to have more of cloud native SaaS.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
You know, I could go on top, like SaaS first, then PaaS. If I don't get any services, then of course I would go to the VMs if nothing else works.
Yeah.
For that specific task.
Is it you specifically that are, if you have PowerShell script, for instance, or modules that you created for your internal stuff, is it you who specifically are running this? Are you the end user of that? Okay, so we have some people that have other people who are using, like a shared library, for instance. Then my question then would become like, if we move along with the cloud native thing, we have stuff like Go. Like, why choose PowerShell over Go, for instance? And I have a couple of things that would seem kind of similar when we start going. So PowerShell is a cross-platform now, luckily, based on scripts and modules. It's easy to learn. I think we all can agree on that at least. And I would say it's relatively easy to master. You know, the depth doesn't go into like a very technical. Obviously, some people do weird stuff with anything, but like in most cases, you can get really good without actually, you know, you don't need to know how to program. So, while with Golang, it's cross-platform. it builds standalone binaries, which means when you're done, you can just build it, and then you have a binary or exe file, executable file, that you can just like give to anyone, and they can run it. It works. There's nothing there. They don't need anything except that one binary. It's also relatively easy to learn, even for those who don't come from like a programmer side of things, because they have it's a new language. It's going to have its confirmation in not that long, but it's a relatively new language, at least in like computer terms. They started slow and just like implemented this like easy to understand concept with the syntax, but it is hard to master, because at the point where you want to be at in the end, you are usually at a point where you actually have to do programming for real and not just fake it and copy from online stuff. Let's see if this can change. Oh, cool. All right. So what I want to do for demos, because obviously we want to have demos. It's a requirement on these types of things. I wanted to show how we could use. Well, first of all, I can remove all the clutter, and I probably need to Oh. Is that too big? That was too big. All right. Jesus. That good for everyone? All right. Let's see if we can run this and actually. So there was a talk yesterday about administering Kubernetes with PowerShell, and there was talks about Crescendo to create commandlets for to use with Kubernetes, but what I've always end up doing if I needed to do something a little bit more advanced, because kubectl is a fine tool. It's a little bit straightforward sometimes, and it's a little bit hard to get it to do what you want it to do. But luckily, you can output into both JSON and YAML if you wanted to. So since we can then get it out to YAML, we can then convert it to an object and obviously start looking at what's going on. So if we just do this, and hopefully I don't break anything. If I now look at pods, right, first of all, do like that. Now we have, we have all our pods. Then I can start doing stuff like count. Okay, got 10 pods, cool. Not a big system. Or I can specifically like start going into the metadata and look at the names. These are the names of my pods. Like this makes sense, right? It's a relatively easy step to just get a little bit more control and a little bit more dynamic than what you would have with kubectl, because if you were doing it that way, you would have to then repeat that or try to crunch the. Have anyone used JSON path to try to filter stuff? Like if you don't know how that works, you can kind of just sit there and scratch your head and go, why do I have no results? So this makes more sense for us because we're used to having this kind of like approach to things. And we can do that with basically anything. So we can do that with nodes, which is very exciting with one node. But as we can see as well as we get all the information that we need into this object. So if I look at status, we have all kinds of information from condition and capacity and everything that we would need to know about how our nodes are doing, which means we then can automate that, right? We can do some checks. We can do something that could trigger a warning or if something went wrong, or and we can do stuff like looping. So for instance, and this is a really bad example, so don't do it like this, but I didn't have the time to do anything better. For instance, like just running out a list of all the pods. What is their name? Are they running? So this works to a certain extent, right? We all agree on that. But at the same time, it's I don't think, like, I haven't deep dived into Crescendo. I think that would be a good way of doing things, but in the end, what you end up doing is creating these functions that are basically, again, just an abstraction layer, so you don't have to, always put that into a variable, so you can define it. So you have, what you're used to from the PowerShell world. So if I don't know, they're all paths. That's weird. So now you have like this traditional way of dealing with these sort of things. And is that good? Like, do we want to have it like this? Like, I'm not totally sure. Personally, as a person who came from PowerShell, when I started using PowerShell, I didn't know how to program. I think I tried to start learning to program for 20 times at least, like during my youth. But fortunately, I have ADHD, so that never worked. And it wasn't until I started working in IT and I had PowerShell, and I kind of slowly like have that like daily, continuous improvements on scripts and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, all like this programming thing started starting to get stuck. And I think we can get pretty far with PowerShell at the moment. But what I would like to see is more adoption of PowerShell in a cloud-native world, because we don't have a lot of that. If you are in the CNCF or anything like that, and if you speak of something related to Windows, you can see people like get physically, and PowerShell still is a Windows thing, which again is unfortunate. I literally created a module for a cloud, it's called Civo Cloud. They have Kubernetes clusters built on K through S, so they're small clusters. So you can say, I want a cluster, and it's up in like 10 seconds. They had an API, they didn't have a PowerShell module. I created a PowerShell module, which was cross-platform. Even Civo went out on Twitter and said, if you're a Windows user, look at this module. And I kind of go like, no, but I ran it on my Linux machine when I built it. It's not a Windows thing anymore. So for me, just to kind of start running up that line of thought, what can we do to adopt this more? Do we need modules? Because we have a bunch of modules. How do we get more people involved that have that cloud native background into PowerShell? So it's kind of hard, because when you're at places like this, obviously, when you start talking to people, how many come from like a Linux background? It's not a lot of people, because that's kind of like the entrance point to PowerShell is Windows, right? I think we have some years before we get to. But anyway, let's. No, I can't remember what the thing was called. Just to do something that's a little bit different. How does this work with something like Terraform? And for you who might not be totally familiar with Terraform, Terraform is basically it's built in Go, so it's a binary. You can run it on any machine. There's no servers or anything like that. You just have your Terraform configuration files, and you run Terraform on it, and then it does stuff. That's a very short sales pitch on Terraform. Terraform has something called a state file. And when you do stuff, it gets added to a state file. What I've noticed is, if I do, and I hope this works, no state file. Oh, maybe I need to be in a place where there's actually stuff. Just checking if it's big enough still. when you list out the state, what's in this state, you can see it. There's a bunch of stuff here. There's also a way to remove things from state. Problem there is that you have to do it one resource at a time. So what if you wanted to like remove, a lot of things at the same time based on like a certain pattern, right? Like a naming convention or something like that. You could actually use, in this particular case, you could actually use PowerShell for it, because Terraform state lists, in this case, uses standard out. So if I do this, and it takes a little while, I can do a count, and I have 7 resources in my state. So at that point, you could, and now I'm doing live stuff, which probably will break. Just mentioning it. Let's see, but just to check. So we can actually manipulate this in some form or fashion. And I'm not totally sure if this is actually production. But let's just destroy it. Why not? So here, what we could have done here is we could say, so much fun. All right. I'm trying to think. This is also very bad the day after a lot of Lederhosen and
You can actually use like other tools like Casper in the same things while doing this things. So like if you're doing some testing, it's best to do this.
Yeah. For instance. So yeah. And that's the thing that I kind of wanted to do before this talk also. As I'm implementing a lot of things at Crayon, we want testing to be a thing, and there's a lot of testing frameworks for Kubernetes and that kind of thing, like where you have like policies that you define and so on and so forth. But what I would like to have done is actually have some of these tests run with Pester, because that would have been really cool. And since, for instance, like Terraform, just outputs a string, you can at least look at it and make sure that stuff is happening like you expect.
Yeah, I tested it last night.
Yeah.
After the party.
Yeah. Especially in instance. All right, but let's. All right, never mind. Let's not do that. I was thinking about doing something, but I found out that I simply don't work today on that level. Anyway, little short on time, but so just to summarize before this happens, the way that like the cloud native ecosystem is now moving, it seemed to me that PowerShell, which is a tool that I love, obviously, is kind of getting left out a little bit. There's not a lot of people or companies that focus on doing cloud native things and then using PowerShell. But they can. There's so many things that you can do with PowerShell still, because like I said, you could either get it out as JSON. The Terraform state file is actually JSON, so you could just make that into an entire thing if you wanted to. There's so many options to do it, but you have to think out of the box. it's not just like something that you get, like order one PowerShell, managed cloud native environment, and then all of a sudden you have it. That doesn't exist. So what I want to focus on going forward for like the PowerShell part of thing, because I do a lot of things, and PowerShell has kind of been a little bit left out in the recent years due to a lot of things. But I want to get into, for instance, like Pester. Pester is a great tool. It's a really great tool. And if we could, for instance, have create something that will show how to use Pester in such environments, that would be cool. Maybe even next year that will be a thing on PSConf that we can talk about and show off. So I would gladly, if anyone here is working in or will be working in a cloud native environment, which just feel free to reach out to me if you have ideas to how we can make this better for people in cloud native, and hopefully get some more PowerShell adoption, because I would really like to see that, because it's really close to none. I'm one of the very few, it seems. Unless if you're in PSConf and someone else is doing cloud native, then there's a chance. Any thoughts? Yeah?
Well, I don't really know if I agree or disagree with you.
Okay.
Or maybe I do both at the same time, because PowerShell wasn't really meant for developers to deal with.
Yep.
And what PowerShell brought originally, before the Monad manifest and stuff like that, was a way to suddenly be able to do remote consoling and really go into all the nooks and crannies of the system in an unseen scale. And quickly after that, they built the tools to make web requests and stuff like that. Because that way PowerShell could suddenly be used in an operational way to gather intel, perhaps reboot something. In essence, it enabled, especially the operational types, to manage at scale instead of having to manage specific items.
Yes. Yes.
And at the same time, developers have been moving in on the operational arena with Kubernetes, with much more infrastructure-minded stuff, for lack of better words. So the demand to make PowerShell a full-blown programming language is somewhere between the lines, but
and
trying to use something that was meant for something else.
No, but that's actually not what I'm saying, because you don't necessarily have only developers doing cloud native. Kubernetes is a really good platform to have centralized services, operational services. So there are not only, and you don't need to know how to build these applications in some aspects also to run it on Kubernetes. You can be a user of certain operators and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that we need to make PowerShell more than what it is. But there's the same reason why I started the Azure Cloud Native user group, or part of one of the founders of that, is because when you start looking into, for instance, like Terraform documentation, there's a big chance it might say, all right, on AWS you do this, on Google Cloud you do this, and there's ops. Because again, like from like a cloud native perspective, a lot of these Microsoft related things, they're not supposed to be there, or I don't know what they're thinking. But obviously Microsoft has gone through a big change when it comes to open source, when it comes to cloud native things. Just the fact that like Brendan Burns himself is now working on Kubernetes in Microsoft, that kind of like speaks to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Again with that, sorry. In fact, like PowerShell, as for me, I've been developing in PowerShell for a long time. And in fact, when it started, it was like just remote management. Just it was hugely beneficial to just be able to remote into another server and do some stuff. When I started to develop modules, I got to see more of, okay, I can connect to DLL modules, which is in fact just internal tools that Microsoft is using. So, in fact, it's the same things that C# is using, which we can use actually same as other development toolkits. So, as he's mentioned, I'm using also Go, and so I'm seeing PowerShell also reaching that stage that PowerShell is reaching for us development tool. As you see, like PowerShell PS Universal is now an API tool. So that's
and you can run PowerShell in a container.
Yeah.
You know, so and again, it's a like silly demo of a powerful concept. But for instance, here I literally just have I'm using the Azure PowerShell container because then I don't have to do anything. So I don't have to build my own container and install PowerShell, etc., etc. Microsoft has done that for me. And then I just copy a script over. I make sure that you're able to run it, and then it's going to run. And it's just going to run once, and then we're done, right? The script is this. It's from Icon Has Dad Jokes. I like select object expand property joke. That sounds good. And if I am able to do this, just delete that one. So again, sorry about the mess. Here we have it. Parshtainer. I didn't know what to call it. And if I run that with nothing, it starts. And in the logs, it's gonna say, how does the moon cut his hair? Eclipse it. So, but with this concept, and if you also think of the fact that, for instance, like in Kubernetes, obviously containers are the way that you're running stuff. But Kubernetes also have something called jobs. And they have something called cron jobs, which is jobs just on a clock. That one, if you do a cron job, you can literally spin up a container that has some sort of like PowerShell logic that you built because that's what you're familiar with. You have very easily just packaged into a container. And every time, let's say every hour, it would basically just spin up the container and do that one task, report back success or not. And there you have automated scripting. So you could do stuff like that, and it wouldn't be much different than what you used to do when you went in and created a service on a Windows server to run a script or using, So we can do all this. There's nothing new here. But it's not that well known, or people that do these types of things don't use PowerShell at the moment. But if any of you start like moving into this, maybe start building stuff on Kubernetes, know that you can reuse all of this in a very easy fashion. I'll run it again and see if I get a better joke. Why did Sweden start painting barcodes on the sides of their battleships? So they could Scandinavian. Yeah. Tomorrow I have a talk on GitHub Actions. Let's just say I'm going to reuse this API. So if you want more dad jokes, come see that talk. Anyway, all of these types of code and tidbits will be on my. Oh, this is probably, does this work? All right, cool. There is an official repository. I'm going to upload all the code there in a little bit more detailed fashion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for instance, like how build a container, you can find that here. There's a Docker file. So you can copy my 5 lines, and then you're good to go. Or if you want to know how to do dad jokes, there you go. Also, what I kind of want to, and we have some minutes left, and unless people have questions. So let's. So Go is, again, like I said, it's a relatively easy language to learn, but then there's a lot of like complex concepts on top. But like with anything else, you're probably not the first person who's going to try to do something, right? So you can reuse what other people have been doing. And some people even created like tools to make it easier. So where you as a PowerShell person would create a module for someone to use, so they have all their commands, you would have to create a CLI tool in Go. And there's a handy little thing that's, okay. I'm going to get everything hopefully from the history here. There's a tool called Cobra, like Cobra Commander. So, cool names. And so what I need to do, I need to go reuse what I did earlier. So I now, in Go world, initiated a Go, let's call it a workspace, with a name, so it knows what it is. Then I can use Cobra CLI in it. And he's using some files that I have in my user directory, so it's going to be a little bit weird. But what happened now is that if I open this, it made a main.go file, and it did all this weird stuff that you have to do with if you're creating a CLI tool, which is creating a CMD interface, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into that. But as you can see, it literally just created this for me. So it wasn't really that hard. If I, in here, say go run dot, I get the description of my tool. That's already fixed for it. So you just need to update this, and then you can do Cobra CLI add hello. Again, I'm just repeating what I did earlier, so I don't have to type. And as you can see now, it created the hello file. And it's literally like, here's the function that's going to run if you run this command, subcommand. So if I go run dot hello, it says hello called. So it is relatively easy. It's not hard to do real programming, but at the same time, again, this is easy because someone else went through this and went like, I'm sick and tired of creating CLI tools over and over again. I'm going to create a generator for it and give it a cool name. Most important part of the process. The one that I stop on always, like I continuously try to find cool names, and then that's all I do. But point being is like, it's not really hard, but at the same time, if you are as familiar with PowerShell as we are, let's try to reuse that. And also, I think there are people who aren't aware of what PowerShell can do in that particular side of the business. So unless anyone have anything else to ask, you can get 5 minutes back and drink some extra coffee. Right? Well, thank you.